Therefore, we are going to show you the world is not the way it seems to be. It is merely a matter of perspective, but can be influenced by your identity, and vice versa. Your identity is the answer to the question, who are you? With the recognition that the who is always emerging from the cultures to which we belong. But what is culture? It is a system of shared meanings and assumptions that draw people together within a social context of shared power. But what is power? Where does it reside? It is within you. For you have the power to change or create a culture if you so choose to, because you are the one with the perspective. You are the one.
So, who are you?
What do you mean? I'm Glenn. That's my identity, isn't it?
What is identity? How do you define identity?
Such as a student.
Are you a student all the time? Are you a student when you're with your mother? At church? When you pay your taxes?
So you're saying we all have multiple personalities?
In a sense. We all have multiple selves, shifting and changing as we move through our lives. In the book, Communication, a Critical Cultural Introduction, written by John T. Warren and Deanna L. Fasset, they explain that identity is something that's always in a state of flux.
So how does a person change? And what should we make of this process?
Consider first what it would mean to think of our identity as stable and singular, as if our identity never changed, as if from the moment of our births to the moment of our deaths, we stayed the same.
We wouldn't grow and become someone different as a result of life. We wouldn't even be alive.
Exactly. Marilyn B. Brewer argues that the personal levels of self-definition represent the distinct forms of self-representation with different origins and sources.
But if you really think about the events in life, the idea of being stable, unchanging, and a fixed identity starts to feel really restrictive.
Life in general is about change. Therefore, we must change as well.
It makes sense. It does make sense. Because if you think about it, think back to the moment in September 11 after the incident, our whole nation changed as if our jobs, our friends, our families changed, and the whole nation together, identity changed itself as a whole.
Whether we are at war or not affects our identity. The loss of a loved one, the effect of education, a marriage or divorce, the birth of a child, they all affect our identities and changes us forever.
So we aren't the same people as if we were holding our childs or even giving a speech in communication class, even if both themselves are, in the end, you.
And it seems as if our identities are broken into pieces, or we may be all schizophrenic, but it's the diverse conditions around us that forces us to change.
Think of it this way. If we were static and unchanging, it would force us to make the same mistakes. It is this complex, growing self that causes us to make change in our lives and in the world.
What do you see? I see students walking to class. Look deeper. I see individuals with different lives and different goals, all living in the same community together. Good. That is your perception.
What do you mean by perception?
Like identity, perception is always a product of who we are in a moment and the conditions we find ourselves within.
Our identities are formed through context, which is formed through communication.
Imagine how mediated choices like fashion magazines and music videos affect our choices. Who we are, how we look, and what we do are all affected by the various messages we encounter.
But in any study of the social world, with the study of communication, I read a talk, social network, and media that suggests that a social reality emerges through our actions, and that our world and the social rules we live by are the products of our communication.
Both verbal and non-verbal. Imagine this. If you were to apply for a job, and you happened to put on your resume that you were Mexican, and you got the job, would you be worried that you got the job simply because of your race?
No. Maybe. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. You got the job you wanted. Does it really matter if it was because of your race or not?
I prefer to be hired because I'm qualified and I work hard.
And those are also qualities of your identity as a worker. You can choose to believe that you got the job because you're a good college student and you're aiming for a career. Or you can choose to believe that they simply hired you because it would add more diversity to their employment. As long as you are paid the same wages, given the same benefits, and move up the ladder of employment, it doesn't matter how you got the job or the fact that you have one at all. That too is up for you to proceed. Do you think we are who we are because we choose to? Or are we simply a manifestation of what we see around us?
I decide who I am, and I'm in control.
What kind of question is that? A symbolic one. What?
George Herbert Mead and Herbert Bloomberg theorized by its very nature that the self is a product of the messages that it has encountered over past interactions and named it justly the symbolic interactionism theory. Lindsay D. Nelson and E. Griffin would agree.
So I only am the way I am because of the experiences I had as a kid?
According to this theory, you are not the author of your own identity.
Well, that's discouraging.
If we had grown up in a world without racism and a history of inequality, we might not have the same perspective on the world as we do today. If you had grown up with a different family,
I might not have the same values as I do today.
if you had not lived the life you had, you would not be the same person. You would be an entirely different person with different values and different beliefs, because the messages you received would have been different than the ones you have received throughout your life.
I'm not sure how comfortable I am about that. I'd feel more reassured by the idea that I decide who I am.
It may comfort you to know that you play the most important role in that process. The messages you receive, nonetheless important, will affect you, but you are the one that brings them into being. Without you to act on those messages and to create them into something positive, they may as well not even exist. Some scholars would suggest that we can and do work to assert some control in this process, and argue that we engage in something called impression management, which is observing that we build an impression of ourselves, for ourselves and for others. This presentation of self often involves communication choices such as what to wear, when to arrive, how and when to speak, and what to reveal and to whom. For example, you wouldn't wear a bathing suit to a job interview as a CEO, and you wouldn't wear a tuxedo to a monster truck rally. We do this to meet the expectations of others and to meet our personal expectations on how we view ourselves.
So, like symbolic interactionism, impression management relies on cultural cues.
If you read a dozen books on how to interview for jobs and everyone you know tells you how to present yourself successfully, you will use those messages to meet the expectations you imagine the employer has.
All these expectations derive from values a community has. So if my parents tell me to wear a suit to an interview, they'll speak of me highly, which will reinforce my qualifications for the job.
In either of these theories, we have little control over our identity. Who we are precedes us and surrounds us in messages we receive and communicate about other communities, cultures, and experiences.
In the end, the question of who we are lies in communication, and the cultures that produce messages and reinforce ideas so that often they become invisible.
Exploring communication makes cultures, values, and beliefs real. It doesn't just remind us that our messages have consequences,
but also that we can change even those aspects of ourselves and our world that seem the most natural or inevitable.
In this way, we have agency, the conscious ability to reproduce or resist social systems, the government, the military, healthcare industries, the educational system, the judicial system, and so forth. So what are you waiting for? Become an agent, and together we can change the world.